Alright, this screencast is going to start with two terms, insulting terms actually, for different people in the South after the Civil War. Scalawags and carpetbaggers. We're going to define scalawag first. A scalawag was someone who was a Southern Republican. The Republican Party is obviously not very popular in the South since they're leading the Reconstruction efforts. And so they're definitely the minority party. So you were kind of almost seen as a traitor if you were a Southern Republican. Most Republicans who lived in the South were small-scale farmers. They kind of want to see a shift away from the plantation owners and kind of more of a balance in the economy. So they would be considered Republicans. A carpetbagger was someone who was actually from the North, but who moved to the South after the war, strictly for economic opportunity. Obviously, there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done in the South. The South's going to have to kind of come up from the ground up, and there's economic potential to invest in the South as it's on its way up. So a lot of Northerners kind of come down to the South and try to just make personal profits in the South. So they're profiting off of the Southern destruction, really. And so those people were called carpetbaggers. All right, we're going to transition now to a new period of Reconstruction. I would say Andrew Johnson's earlier period was a little more lax, kind of like Lincoln's towards the South, kind of letting them get away with things, including passing the black codes. But radical Republicans don't want to allow that to continue, so they're going to take some more direct actions in Congress to intensify Reconstruction efforts in the South. So what we're going to do is we're going to see an act pass out of Congress called the Reconstruction Act of 1867. This will divide the South into military districts. And U.S. troops, federal troops, are going to be sent to each district to kind of command and be in charge of that district. So it kind of puts the South under military order. And you can kind of see in the screen on the video the map of these different districts. Okay, so we're kind of looped in with Texas there. The main purpose for the troops being sent to the South was kind of to force change on the South, including through the following methods. They want to ensure voting rights for African Americans, which we'll talk about the 15th Amendment a little bit later. They want to ensure voting rights for African Americans. They want to ensure that the South is ratifying the 14th Amendment. They also want to make sure that the new state governments and constitutions that are being created in the South are acceptable. They just kind of want to monitor that process. And they also want to make sure that Confederate leaders are not voting. They should not be voting, so they want to make sure that they are not voting. So that's going to take place kind of towards the end of Johnson's presidency, but we're going to see something take place in Johnson's presidency that hasn't happened to any president until him. Andrew Johnson is going to be impeached. Now, basically, this is a long relationship he has with Congress that is not a good one. He and Congress really do not get along very well. He's a Republican, but he wouldn't really be considered a radical Republican at all. And radical Republicans are holding the majority of Congress at this point. Radical Republicans are passing many civil rights bills that he keeps vetoing. He vetoes a lot compared to the presidents before him. Now, also, Johnson had been kind of plucking off of the cabinet radical Republicans that Lincoln had chosen. And there was one left, Edwin Stanton, as seen on the screen. Edwin Stanton was Lincoln's Secretary of War, and he was the last radical Republican left on the presidential cabinet. And they want to protect him. Congress wants to protect Stanton's place on the presidential cabinet. And so they passed something called the Tenure of Office Act. The Tenure of Office Act states the president needs Senate approval to remove officials from office if that official's appointment had already been approved by the Senate. So if the Senate already approved someone who's in power in the executive branch, the president can't just remove him for whatever reason he likes. He has to have more of a specific reason, and the Senate has to approve it. well, he's going to defy this act because honestly the act's not constitutional itself, because the president does get to pick his cabinet, but they did pass the law. Johnson's going to violate the act and remove Stanton from his position anyway. At that point, the House of Representatives is going to vote to impeach Andrew Johnson. Remember that the House is who impeaches a president, and impeachment just refers to the fact that they formally charge him with wrongdoing. So he'll actually go to trial in the Senate. Now, Democrats and moderate Republicans side with Johnson, but the radical Republicans want him out. They actually are one vote short of voting guilty, meaning he's acquitted, he's found not guilty, so he is not removed from office. Many feel like the radical Republicans have just gone too far, and later the Tenure of Office Act was proclaimed as unconstitutional. And then the last thing I'll say is that the president who's going to replace Johnson after he does finish out this term, Lincoln's term that he finishes as president, in the election of 1868, Ulysses S. Grant, the former Union general, will be selected as the Republican candidate, and he will pretty easily win the election. All right, and we'll pick up with the rest of the notes in class tomorrow. Please write down any questions you have, and I will see you then.